Hello, this is Jerry Morton. Welcome to my Finding My Way podcast. This is podcast number 15, titled Getting Through Houston. Getting Through Houston is a story from my adult years. The collection of stories I have written and am reading to you cover many subcultures in our country that I have interacted with from childhood to my adult and senior years. A more extensive introduction to the Finding My Way stories takes place in the beginning of Podcast 1. Regardless of which podcast you are listening to, you will find the story both entertaining and worthy of your reflective thoughts concerning its contents. The stories, as a collection, provide insight into a span of time that has played a role in shaping American culture and influencing its future. The stories provide you with a sense of admiration for the culture's collective courage and our country's commitment to justice and its optimistic willingness to address new challenges. Getting Through Houston. My Saturday night hitchhiking adventure in downtown Houston needs some background so that you can appreciate the full impact of it. The summer of 1963 was coming to an end. Friday was my last day of working as a deckhand on a state-of-the-art ocean-going dredge boat. This was my second summer of working on one. It was dredging out a deep water channel for the intercoastal waterway of the Texas coast. Saturday morning, I was to catch a bus to Houston. I'd arrive in Houston about 10:30 in the evening, go to the train station, and sleep there overnight. At 6 a.m. Sunday, my train would pull out. My wonderful Anna would meet me at the train stop in Danville, Kentucky. She'd already gotten settled into the women's dorm. We'd walk up to the men's college dorm. I'd drop off my luggage. We'd eat supper at a downtown restaurant. I had my summer's wages and modest poker winnings on me. The $800 plus was wrapped around my foot, covered by my sock. We could afford the meal, thanks to the money in my sock. I had so many stories to tell her about my summer job. This was the start of a great year. Almost a month earlier, I had turned 21. Being isolated from land delayed any celebrations. When I wasn't working overtime, I'd just go to my folks' home in Port Lavaca and sleep until it was time to catch the crew boat back to the dredge. Being 21 was nice. I was a real man now. Anna and I would get married in the end of the academic year, then go on to find jobs, go to graduate school or whatever to begin our lives for real. The Saturday morning that I was to leave Port Lavaca for Houston, my parents went with me to the bus station. There were few parked cars in front of the station that early morning, but then there probably were not many cars there at any time. The bus station in Port Lavaca was small. It was the right size for the town. When my parents and I walked into it, I immediately saw a fellow dredge boatman. He wasn't a member of my section, but we had worked some together when all the shifts were working. That happened whenever the dredge boat had to shut down. We had to correct the problem as fast as possible. The company didn't make money when the dredge boat was out of action. I had pulled a couple of 24-hour shifts during the summer. After the first 8 hours, you got time and a half. That was an extra 75 cents an hour. That was big money. The college student kitchen staff I worked with during the year made 65 cents an hour. Making $2.25 an hour built up my savings to make it through the school year. It was important money. My shipmate looked bad. He looked about the way he did on the dredge boat, but that was a different context. His gray beard was just unshaven stubble that seemed as unruly as his short-cropped gray hair. His thin body had a slight forward lean to it that continuously suggested he was about to fall over. The bloodshot eyes with their deep shadows hinted that he was hungover. Briskly walking up to him, I held out my hand. We shook hands and exchanged greetings as my folks walked up to us. After I introduced him to my parents and determined that we would not be traveling on the same bus, he stated to my father, "He's a good man. He's really a good man." Poor Dad was a little taken back by this, but responded graciously enough. Being a career Coast Guard man, I was fairly certain he was reading rather well the signs this guy wore. The fellow was a nice man. He'd been very quiet on the dredge boat, but you could count on him to do his job. I wondered what caused him to be a lowly deckhand at this stage in his life. Gratefully, the call to board my bus came quickly. I said goodbye one more time to my shipmate, hugged my mom and shook my dad's hand, and boarded the bus. It was an all-day and into-the-night long ride from Port Lavaca to Houston. Last summer's trip back on the bus had been an adventure. The last half of the trip was the most uncomfortable, I remembered. The bus got really crowded. Someone would end up sitting beside you. This kept you from lying on the two seats and sleeping. I had worked 7 straight days before catching the bus. I was tired and planned to sleep as much as I could. Once I got from the bus station in Houston to the train station, I'd planned to see the nightlife. I was just 21. I was a man. Maybe I'd even go into a bar and have a drink. I'd never done that before and wasn't sure how not to feel awkward while pretending to behave naturally. Well, I wasn't sure how the night was going to work out. Maybe I'd just stay in the train station all night. Anyway, the whole trip was going to be an adventure. I wanted to have slept as much as I could before reaching Houston. My overall strategy was to pretend to be asleep at all of the little towns where we stopped. The entering passengers would see me stretched out on the seat as they walked down the first third of the bus and go to the back for an open seat. They would not want to wake me. That was the unspoken rule I had learned from last summer's trip. Texas is a big place. It seemed the bus traveled forever without ever passing a house, let alone a little town. It was just open rangeland. Last summer, the bus had stopped in the middle of nothing to pick up a frail, elderly man carrying only a violin case. When he entered the bus, he and the driver conversed. There was no exchange of a ticket or money. Once the bus resumed traveling, he opened the case and took out the violin. He began playing it. The little Hispanic children would peek at him from behind their seats with big grins on their faces, while their mothers tugged at them to keep them from going to him. He played terribly, but with great vigor, smiling and dipping the violin at the kids. They loved it. After 10 or 20 minutes of playing, the elderly man simply stopped playing, replaced his violin in its case, walked to the front of the bus and said something to the bus driver. The bus stopped. He got off. It was the middle of nowhere. There were no houses, no cars, and no hint of civilization anywhere except for the road, the bus, and the telephone poles. As the bus pulled away, the man waved to the children. A few waved back. Unusual characters rode the bus. I didn't want to interact with anyone on this trip. My pretend sleep at the bus stops was working, even as the bus slowly filled with the approach of sunset. I could tell the bus was about full, which served as a greater incentive to pretend to be asleep at each small town stop. Awakening to the commotion outside my bus window, I was pleased to realize that I had been asleep. The bus had stopped in some unknown town. A lot of voices were right outside my window. Stretching my neck up to the window's edge, I was shocked to see what was going on. In the center of the crowd stood a huge black man holding out his hands for a uniformed officer to unlock his handcuffs. The crowd was definitely agitated. They were pressing the bald black man and officer as his shackles were removed. Then the whole mob moved toward the front of the bus. That is one man I don't want sitting beside me, I thought as I hunkered down into my fetal position with a determination to do the best job of pretending sleep an awake person could do. Sure enough, through the tiniest peek between my shut eyes, I could see him approach my seat. He stood there for a few seconds, just looking at me. Thank God, he finally moved towards the back. I relaxed and snuggled into the comfort of the seat. As the bus pulled out, I heard a sound in the aisle by my feet. Cracking my eyes open just the tiniest bit, I saw him sitting in the aisle, facing the front of the bus. The bus must be full. Pretending to just be waking up, I began to stretch and sit up. Our eyes met. "Oh, excuse me, sir. Please sit here," I said, pretending surprise and humility. He rose from the aisle and towered over me. "Can I sit by the window?" "Sure you can," I said, starting to move behind him to the aisle. "I actually prefer to sit in the aisle seat," I exclaimed as we squeezed past each other. Once we settled in, I began a little small talk with him. He responded quite pleasantly. Suddenly, getting serious, he stated, "They didn't treat me right back there. I didn't do anything wrong, and me a World War II vet." Well, my dad was a World War II vet and had told me lots of stories about that time. For most of my childhood, it was assumed that I would be a Coast Guard career military officer. I knew a lot of stories from that time and was always interested in hearing more of them. "They shot me in the head," he stated as he twisted his heavily muscled body from the window to show me the indentation in the upper part of his bald skull. "There's no bone there. Go ahead, you can touch it. It's just skin." I certainly didn't have a need to touch it. There was a clear bullet hole there, and it certainly looked as if there was no bone under its depression into his head. "Did you have to stay in the hospital a long time?" "I've been in and out of the VA hospital ever since. My brain doesn't work right. For the last few years, I've lived in that VA hospital up from the town. Those people don't treat me right, those cops and the others. I can leave the hospital whenever I want. They arrested me and put me in jail. The hospital told them it was okay. I'm going to Houston to see my friends. They haven't been to see me for a while." He went on and talked about himself. I asked questions and sympathized with him. Then he started asking me questions. I told him about my college and working on the dredge boat. He asked some good questions and seemed to be genuinely interested. I even told him about turning 21. As we were pulling into Houston, he enthusiastically exclaimed, "Let's go out and party with my friends. They'll be at the bus station. I'll fix you up with a good woman who knows how to take care of men. Right off, I knew this was going to be delicate. It's like I said, I have to get to the train station because the train to Kentucky leaves so early in the morning. But thank you. I appreciate the offer. Ah, you come on with me, my friends. There's a Houston most wise folks know nothing about. Come on now. It took considerable persuading, but I got it across as to how important it was to me to not miss my train. Anna would be waiting for me at the Danville stop. She would be really stressed if I weren't on the train. I had no way of calling her to let her know I'd be late if I missed it. Most reluctantly, he accepted the fact that I had best not go with him. However, when we got off the bus and met the two rather attractive women waiting for him, he tried to enlist them in convincing me to allow them to show me a good time. Once again, I had a diplomatic challenge not to offend anyone. In the end, the guy shook my hand with great relish. The women waved goodbye. We left the bus depot in opposite directions. I caught a taxi to the train station. It was on the far side of town. There weren't many people in the huge station. The ones who were there were mainly trying to sleep on the benches or reading. There were a few military guys scattered about, obviously moving to a new assignment of some kind. I felt sorry for them. They all looked tired and sad. Their big duffel bags sat in the seat beside them or at their feet. Placing my satchel in one of the storage lockers, inserting the coins and locking the door, I was ready for Houston. Well, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. It was about 11 p.m. I was tired. Maybe I'd just catch some Z's. Fortunately, I had the knack of being able to sleep about anywhere. On the early morning crew boat's hour-and-a-half run from the company dock to the dredge, I'd curl around the warm smokestack and sleep. You'd think that the summer heat on the Gulf would make it uncomfortable to experience the heat of the stack. The truth was that the early morning coolness was enhanced by the wind generated by the speed of the tug's movement through the water. The ocean-going tug's diesel engine was powerful. Even with my hard hat and life jacket on, I was really comfortable hugging the stack. With the warmth of the stack and the rocking movement of the tug through the sea, I napped most comfortably. Lying down on the bench in the train station didn't work. I was too excited about getting back to Kentucky and kept thinking I was missing out on having fun in Houston, this first real night I had to celebrate being 21. I just walked towards downtown and see what was going on. Maybe I'd get a drink in a bar. At first, it was just dark streets with nothing open. After 10 blocks or so, I was in the bright lights. There were bars on both sides of the street. Several of the bars had guys in top hats calling to people to go inside. They said that there were beautiful girls inside who would take care of you. The pictures of the almost fully nude women on the windows of the bars suggested that they were right. "Come on in, this is what you're looking for," the top-hand man shouted with a smile and a hand on my arm. "No, I've got an appointment." He smiled with a knowing look and tipped his hat to me. I briskly walked down the street, ignoring the other calls for my attention. This was not what I wanted. What would I do? Go into a bar and order a drink? They would probably want to see my ID because I looked so young. I'd sit by the bar, alone, and afraid to talk to anyone. No telling what kind of character would be a bar stool or two away from me. Certainly not anyone I'd want to talk to. Let's face it, I'm in the babe in the woods in this setting. I could get robbed of my entire summer's earnings. They'd easily find the money in my sock. I would be unable to look at the new girls because of my embarrassment at being in the place like this. What a bad fantasy this whole thing had been. What I really wanted to do was to talk to some college-age kids like myself and share stories with them. I'd ask them about living in Houston, where they went to college or work, stuff like that. Well, I reasoned, if that's what I wanted, then I better go where the high school and college kids hang out. That would be at a drive-in restaurant. There ought to be some around here in a big city like this. That's where we all hung out in Pittsburgh during my high school years. Yeah, that was a good plan. I set out to find my drive-in. After walking what seemed like several miles into the downtown area of the city, I was careful to note various landmarks to find my way back to the train station. I could see the drive-in restaurant. It was huge. The parking spaces were all full and cars were slowly cruising around it through the parking area. Walking up to the street corner just opposite, I looked into the maze. Music was blaring from dozens of parked cars. They all seemed full of boys and girls. Everyone seemed happy and engaged in talking. Now, just what was I going to do? Was I simply going to walk up to a full car and say, "Hi, I'm just passing through. I've just been working on the dredge boats. I was had a great adventure. It's a totally different way of living. I'm going back to Kentucky to go to college and be with Anna, and I just wanted to talk with people tonight before my train leaves in the morning." This was stupid. If someone had come up to my car window in Pittsburgh, I'd have thought they were strange and rolled up the window and driven off. Well, maybe I wouldn't do that, but I know a lot of people in Pittsburgh who would. This was simply dumb. A driver leaned over to the passenger side window and said, "Where are you going?" "I'm going back to the train station," came my spontaneous reply, noting that the guy looked to be a clean-cut college-type fellow. "I'll take you there." "No, thank you, but I'll just walk." "No, it's a long way, not a problem for me. I'm just killing time." "Okay, thank you." Opening the door, I got in. He was very personable. When I explained how I came to be in Houston that night, he said he'd drive me around the downtown area and give me a tour. He'd gone to college for a couple of years, but was working a good job somewhere now. I really liked talking with him. As we came to a stop at a red light, he suddenly reached across my upper thigh and began rubbing the inside of my leg. "Never happened," I hissed. I was ready to fight. He jerked his hand back. With a shocked expression on his face, he blurted out, "But why did you get in the car? I thought you knew." "It's like I told you. What I told you about me was true." I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I just thought you knew." "Just let me out of here. I can make it to the train station." No, you'd get lost. I'll take you back to where I picked you up." "Okay." There was a long silence as we drove across the streets. At last I recognized a drive-in restaurant coming up ahead. As he slowed to stop at the very intersection where I'd gotten into his car, he said, I'm really very sorry. I just thought you knew why I stopped for you. That's understood here at this corner. I'm so sorry." As I opened the door to leave, I said, "It's okay. I'm sorry too." So there I was on the street corner again. Without hesitation, I turned and began walking back to the station. I was pretty much certain that I knew the way back, even though it would be a long walk. Maybe I'd have that drink now. That experience was a first for me. It was upsetting. Damn. all of the bars were closed. It was just straight back to the station. I decided to take a shortcut off the main streets to save time. There were hardly any cars on the back streets. Just a lone one would drive quickly down the deserted corridors every now and then. The traffic lights commanded empty space to stop and go with a relentless vigor. Of course it was late. I didn't have a watch, but guessed it to be about 1 or 1:30 in the morning. The tall buildings hemmed me in. They hemmed me into the 4-lane canyon of a road I was walking down. The backs of the buildings faced me with their windowless walls. A few people came out of a steel door at street level from what looked like the back of a movie theater on the opposite side of the street. They quickly turned a corner and began to disappear up the 2-lane side street as I started to step off of the curb. When I started to step off the curb, the intersection light was green. It said I could go. Just as my lead foot touched the road, a small red convertible sports car came roaring down the side street towards me. I hesitated. In that second, my signal light turned red. I stepped back at this. The 2-seater was gearing down to stop. The whole scene brought laughter to my lips. Here I am on Houston's deserted streets with no one in sight, trying to be a good citizen, crossing the street on a green light when it suddenly changes. A fancy convertible sports car roars down the street and stops, first to keep from hitting me and then to motion me across the street while the driver waits for me to pass. Both the driver and I burst into laughter at the ridiculousness of the situation. "Go on across," he said, waving me to move. "No, it's okay. You go ahead." No, you go on." We both laughed out loud. "Where are you going? I can give you a ride." He shouted at me over the purr of his engine. "Oh, no, thank you anyway. I'm just going to the train station." "That's all right. I can drive you there. It's no problem, really. I just got off work and was going home." "No, you don't understand," I stated a little more seriously. "I just had a bad situation happen. I was walking down the street and someone else offered to give me a ride. When I got in, he put his hand in my lap. I don't want to risk that happening again." "Oh, no. What a situation. I'm not like that. I really can give you a ride. It's not any trouble. You're safe with me," he stated with an understanding smile. "Come on. It will save you a lot of walking." Well, I was tired. He seemed really nice. It was a funny situation. He seemed to be about my age or a little older, with a good sense of humor. "Okay." And with that, I walked over to the passenger side of the car as he pushed the door open. We got talking as he drove down the road, making a turn here, a turn there, and then a couple more turns. I was working hard to keep oriented, just in case this guy had another agenda. He was truly personable and asked good questions. Quickly he got my story, going back to college, the dredge boat summer, the bus ride, and the loneliness of being in Houston. He told me that he was working the night shift just to make money for his next adventure. It was good pay for what it was. After a year or so of college, he left before he declared a major. He just wanted to experience life away from studying for a while. That was when he had gotten the sports car. A buddy of his joined him for a multi-month adventure driving the entire distance of Route 66. His whole story resonated with me. There had been several times in college when I felt stifled by all of the studying and questioned the whole purpose of it all. Life was roaring by me, and I had another test coming up. If it hadn't been for Anna, I'd probably have flunked out by now. She kept me studying. I wanted to be with her. I loved her. There had been a TV series about a couple of guys traveling on Route 66. They kept having adventure after adventure. In a way, this guy was living part of my fantasy life. "I can tell you why the bars were closed. Houston has a law that says they have to close at midnight on Saturdays. They can't be open on Sundays," he explained. "Hey, I have a friend who has this great bachelor's pad right in the center of the city. We could go and have a drink there. He's got a great liquor cabinet. He's out of town right now, but he lets me have a key for any time I want to use it." "Nah, that'd be too much. I don't want to impose." No, really, he wouldn't mind. He's got all kinds of money. It's a great place. He's got it air-conditioned and a fireplace that you just press a button and it starts up. It's really neat. Besides, we got a good thing going. I want to hear more of your story." That place sounded impressive. On a hot night like tonight, to have air conditioning counteracting a burning fireplace took a lot of expensive electricity. It sounded like something from a James Bond movie. "Okay, but just one drink, then it's on the train to the train station." The apartment was all he said it was. Wall-to-wall, thick white carpeting for the first-floor living room greeted me as we walked in the door. The large room's ceiling was 2 stories up. The back of the first level opened up to a beautiful kitchen. It was the most modern kitchen I'd ever seen. Everything appeared to be shiny new. It was stocked with good food and all kinds of beverages. The shiny pots were hung up on a rack the way you see them in TV cooking shows. I was impressed. The stairwell to the upstairs was just to the front of the kitchen and supported by a sidewall. It went up to a balcony that overlooked the living room area. With the press of a button, he started the gas log fireplace. Then he gave me a tour of the downstairs. The liquor cabinet matched everything else. I decided to have a scotch and water, he poured. After putting on some soft background music that played gently from hidden speakers, we continued our conversation. My host had considered studying to be a minister. He speculated that he still might do that. I was amazed. I had considered going into the ministry late in my high school years. My family had always tried to be active in the Presbyterian Church. My last 2.5 years of high school in Pittsburgh had church and a Sunday school session on the schedule almost every Sunday. Among the things that discouraged me from seriously pursuing that vocation was the idea that everything that could be said about Jesus, God, and the Presbyterian Church had no doubt been said. All that was left was for the people to believe it. The position appeared to be pretty boring to me. I wanted to help people. I particularly wanted to help juveniles who lived hard lives. Some of the communities my family kept relocating to were pretty rough. The kids there had been or were going to end up in jail a lot. It wasn't necessary. They were smart and capable even though they were flunking out of school. They just needed help. I wanted to help them. Amazingly, my host seemed to be the same way. We just clicked. I loved talking with him. We thought the same way. I really liked him. 1 drink became 2 and then 3. I was feeling it. "Gee, it's late," the guy noted, looking at his watch. "Why don't you just sleep over here for a couple of hours? Then I'll fix breakfast and take you to the station." Wait just a minute here. Was this guy really trying to set me up? Maybe he was going to have someone come in and the 2 of them rob me, beat me up, and throw me out on the street. I could take him. I was pretty good at street fighting and in great shape for me. If there were 2 of them, I'd probably get beat. I'd made that mistake once. I'd taken on 2 guys at the same time that I had beaten individually before. Those things don't work the way you see them in the movies or on the television. I lost. No thanks. I think it would be best if I went to the train station now. Oh, come on. That doesn't make sense. You won't be able to sleep on those benches? My friend wouldn't mind. It's no trouble. You're safe here, and I don't mind. We can share a little more time together that way. Well, I was being foolish if this guy was as nice as I thought he was. I mean, I'd do the same thing if our roles had been reversed. He really was a nice guy, and I was ruining a great new friendship with my doubts. Besides, I could take care of myself. Well, if you're sure it's no trouble, okay. That was it. I was staying. We went to the kitchen to rinse out the glasses. We continued to talk. We just seemed to think the same things. It was remarkable. Walking back into the living room, I asked, "Where should I sleep?" "Upstairs. I'll show you the bed." We walked up the stairwell. The view of the living room was just great. There was one large bedroom and a large bathroom with a tub and a shower. The bed was huge. "This is a great bed, thank you. But where will you sleep?" I inquired. I hadn't seen another bedroom downstairs. "Oh," he said with surprise, There's just one bed. We'll both sleep in it." Damn. This was it. The guy was gay. I was in trouble. "Well, I could sleep on the couch downstairs." "No, that won't work. Besides, I just wouldn't feel comfortable with you downstairs and me upstairs. Anyway, the bed is plenty big enough." Damn. Double damn. What was going on here raced through my mind. This guy is so nice. If he is straight and on the up and up, I am being a fool. I don't like this. It would be so easy to jump me in the night. I'd hear someone come in. I can take this guy if I have to. He is so nice, I just don't know. Are you sure about the 2 of us in the same bed?" I asked. "Oh, yeah, it'll be all right," he stated, looking so honestly and innocently at me. All right, I thought. I can take care of myself. I'll stay on the very edge of the bed. If he touches me in the slightest way, I'll spring out of it, and that's it. I'm gone. I'm ready to fight. He'll not fight me. He's too nice a person for that. There's no question that I could take him. I could do him some real harm. Damn. Double damn. Was I ruining a chance for a lifelong friendship? It was like talking to a mirror image of myself. I wanted this to go right so badly. "Okay," I said with a sigh. He began undressing. "I'm going to take a shower. Do you want to take one?" No, I'm okay," I lied. I wasn't about to get nude with this guy in the building. Actually, I would have loved to take a shower. The air conditioning in the bus had not been up to the task of keeping the passengers comfortably cool. It barely met the minimum needs. Houston was hot. The night air was hot and muggy. Then all the walking I had done had caused me to sweat some. Overall, I was clammy. I needed a shower and would not feel comfortable until I had one. He walked to the bathroom and closed the door. He still had his pants on, but had taken everything else off. Taking my shirt and shoes off, I sat on the edge of the bed, pondering what I was going to do. Well, I'd keep my Fruit of the Loom underpants on. I'd have to take my sock off. The sock with the cash in it would be stuffed in the right shoe. I always put the right shoe on first. If I had to run, I'd need my pants on and my shoes on. I lay them out so that I could immediately jump into them at the sign of trouble. There'd be no time to put the socks on. I better stuff them in my pants pockets before I took my pants off. I'd lie there in the bed pretending to be asleep. There was no way I was going to sleep this night. Just the slightest touch from him and I was out of here. God, what would I do if he slept nude in the bed? Well, that was it. I'd insist on leaving. Now, wait a minute, was my next thought. I sleep nude most of the time. Yes, but not when there were other people sleeping in the room with me, as at Boy Scout camp and the like. That would be the line to draw. If he got in the bed nude, I was gone. As I was thinking all of this, I moved to the top of the stairwell and sat on the top steps. This was such a nice place. Everything the guy had told me seemed so authentic. There was nothing he had said or done to suggest that he was anything but what he appeared to be, a very nice person that was kind and thoughtful, who was going out of his way to be helpful to another nice person. I was the crazy one here, thinking of all the bad things that could happen but never would. They would never happen because this guy was just what he appeared to be, and my mistrust was ruining the possibility of a great friendship. He came out of the bathroom, drying his hair with a towel. He was wearing his Fruit of the Looms. Stopping in surprise at seeing me sitting at the top of the stairs, he smiled and asked, "Are you sure you don't want to take a shower?" "Thanks. Actually, I would if it's okay." "Sure, the towels are in the closet in there," he said, motioning into the bathroom. We both entered the bedroom. I went into the bathroom and took a shower. When I came out in my Fruit of the Looms, I could hear him talking to someone. My guard was up. He was downstairs talking to someone. I crept to the edge of the wall, separating the bedroom from the balcony. The back of his head was to me. He was talking to someone on the phone. I couldn't hear all of what he was saying. Just a few words and phrases. "Yes, well, I'm staying overnight. He's nice. Yes, Mom, but, well, call in the morning. First thing, love you." As he hung up the phone, I quietly moved back to the bedroom. When he entered, we exchanged a few words, and then he climbed into bed, staying on the far wall edge. I hugged the opposite edge of the bed, which was closest to the door. I lay on my side facing the door. That was so that if he touched me, I could spring from the bed, grab my clothes, and dash down the stairwell to the door. We said good night. He turned out his bedside light. The hall light stayed on, lighting the bedroom up well enough. He remained motionless, as did I. There was no way I was going to sleep. I just had to endure. Every once in a while, he would slightly stir on his side of the bed. There were no movements towards me. Time seemed to pass so slowly. His foot touched mine. My God, I'd fallen asleep. The slight touch of his foot triggered my automatic reaction. I sprang from the bed, grabbed my pants and shoes, and shot into the hallway. He hadn't moved. He must still be asleep. He must have just rolled over in his sleep and accidentally touched my foot with his. I was just ruining this whole night. This whole adventure could have been simply great except for my distrust. But then again, damn, I thought. Well, there was no going back to bed. I'd just sit here on the stairwell until dawn. What's going on? It's 4 a.m., he sleepily asked, looking at me from the bedroom doorway. This last week on the dredge boat, I was working the first shift. This is the time I usually wake up, I lied. I'll just sit here until it's time for you to get up. No, that won't work. I can't sleep with you up in the apartment. I understood that. He went on, how about I fix us breakfast now and then take you to the station? You'll get there a little early. I agreed. We were both subdued. He fixed bacon and eggs. We were both polite but cautious with each other. He drove me to the station. We shook hands, said goodbye, and that was it. The train ride back to Danville, Kentucky was long, boring, and uncomfortable. There rarely seemed to be more than 5 or 6 passengers in each car. As usual, the passenger cars had trash on the floors, the seats were hard. I had to go through 3 cars before I found one with a bathroom that worked, or a working water fountain. You'd think having the bathrooms work would be a simple thing. When you flushed the commode, you could see the bottom trapdoor open to a clear view of the railroad tracks below. A sign was always over the commodes advising you not to flush while the train was in a station area. The ride through North Texas always seemed to take forever. There's nothing to see but the same continuous open country with no sign of human habitation, period. Hours into this ride through sameness, the train inexplicably began slowing. It finally came to a complete stop. It had stopped in the middle of nothing. There was no station, no house, no road, no nothing except open land with patches of scrub grass and brush. Maybe there was a little station by the engine that I couldn't see. I doubted it. Out of the silence, I heard a sound at the back of the car. Someone was moving and bumping around. I heard the creak of the gate to enter the car from the ground in the open passageway between the cars. Suddenly, the gate slammed against the outside of the train. The door to the compartment slammed open. A real cowboy entered the compartment, carrying a saddle with lasso rope attached to it. He was a young man, thin and wiry. Throwing his saddle into the open window side of the seat nearest the entrance, he plopped down and propped his feet on the seat in front of him. Someone on an earlier trip had reversed that seat so that 4 people could sit facing each other and talk, playing cards, whatever. Pulling the brim of his cowboy hat down to cover his eyes, he promptly went to sleep. About an hour later, the train stopped in the middle of sameness. The land looked the same to me as it had when he first got on. The cowboy pushed his hat back, picked up his saddle, and put it on his shoulder. Getting off the train, he just stood there with the saddle at his feet. There was no station, no road, no one there. It was just him and the land. He didn't seem worried, so I decided not to worry for him. Somewhere in Arkansas, a guy about my age got on the train and we talked all the way to Danville. He was in the Army and was going home to a small town near Lexington, Kentucky. His big stories were about the high school he graduated from and the wild things he and his classmates had done. They sounded like things you see in coming-of-age movies. They were hard to believe. He swore that they were true. Listening to him helped the time pass. I arrived in Danville in the late afternoon. The train just stopped at a railroad crossing, and you got off. There was no station. Anna was standing on the sidewalk beside the road. It was wonderful to kiss her and hug her. We walked up to my dorm where I dropped off my satchel. Then we went hand in hand towards the small business district in downtown Danville. We were so happy to be together. We talked and laughed as we walked. As we were passing the open driveway of a gas station, someone shouted out my name. Looking into the house section of the station, I saw him running up to me with a big grin. It was the guy! It was the guy from Houston! I was stunned. I couldn't believe it. It was him, but it wasn't him. There was no way he could be here. He could not be wearing the uniform of the gasoline company. This was crazy. Giving me a big hug, he said it was so great to see me. He'd gotten admitted to the college. I could not think of his name or what he was talking about. He looked like the identical twin of my bed companion from Houston. Turning to Anna, he said, "He hasn't told you about me, has he?" This was where I was to introduce him to her. I didn't know his name. Things were beginning to come back to me. I was still reeling from the shock of seeing him as the Houston guy. The awkward silence told him I didn't remember his name, and maybe not even him. He was embarrassed and clearly disappointed. I felt terrible as my memory started working. It was prompted by his more calmly telling her his name and saying that in the spring he'd come to the fraternity house asking for guidance about getting into college. I had helped him a lot, he said. It all came rushing back to me. Yes, he was a good guy. I'd spent a lot of time talking about college and what he wanted for himself. It was clear that his friendship with me was important. I had just disappointed him greatly. We shook hands, and I praised his efforts. Anna and I went to the little restaurant we always went to. The elderly black man waited on us, as he always did. He was so kind. You could tell that he thought it was wonderful the way Anna and I loved each other.